$50,000 if you can pretend to be my wife for 1 week. And I promise you'll fail by day 3. That's what millionaire CEO Marcus Ashford told his secretary. What she did next changed both their lives forever. Before we begin, leave a comment telling us what city you're watching from. And at the end, don't forget to rate this story from 0 to 10. Enjoy the story. Marcus Ashford stood frozen in his corner office on the 42nd floor, his phone pressed to his ear, watching his entire carefully constructed world collapse in real time. "What do you mean Eleanor's looking forward to meeting her?" Marcus asked, his voice tight. "Meeting who?" "Your wife, sir," his assistant Brenda replied through the phone. "Mr. Harper specifically mentioned how excited Eleanor is to finally meet Mrs. Ashford. The dinner is confirmed for tomorrow night at 7. Marcus's mouth went dry. 6 months ago, during a casual conversation with Thomas Harper, the elderly billionaire investor had mentioned his philosophy about marriage and business. "I don't invest in men who can't commit to a person," Harper had said. "If you can't make a marriage work, how can you commit to a long-term business strategy?" Marcus, desperate to seem stable and committed, had lied. A small lie, an insignificant lie. "I'm actually married," he'd said. "Recently. We're keeping it quiet." The Harpers lived in Boston. Marcus thought he'd never have to back up that lie. He'd thought wrong. "Sir," Brenda's voice pulled him back, "should I confirm the reservation?" "Yes," Marcus said automatically. "Confirm it. And Brenda, start calling talent agencies. I need a professional actress who can pose as my wife for a week. The Harpers are in town through next Sunday. Offer whatever it takes." "A professional actress," Brenda repeated, her tone carefully neutral. "To pretend to be your wife. For $500 million investors who believe in the sanctity of marriage. Do you have a better idea?" "Actually, sir, I might." Marcus looked through the glass wall of his office. His executive assistant, Claire Matthews, sat at her desk, efficiently managing 3 phone calls while simultaneously reorganizing the chaos of files he'd dumped on her desk that morning. She was good at her job. Excellent, really, professional, presentable, and most importantly, she already knew the business inside and out. An idea formed, impulsive, probably terrible. But Marcus Ashford had built a $2 billion company on bold moves. "Never mind the agencies, Brenda," he said. "I have a better option." He hung up, straightened his tie, and composed his face into the expression he used for closing difficult deals. Then he walked out of his office toward Claire's desk. She didn't look up when he approached, just held up one finger while she finished her phone call. "Yes, Mr. Chen, I'll have Mr. Ashford call you back this afternoon, thank you." She hung up and finally met his eyes. "The contract amendments you wanted are on your desk. I rescheduled your 3 o'clock to Thursday, and your dry cleaning will be delivered by 5. "I need to talk to you about something else," Marcus said. "A business proposition. If this is about working late again, the answer is yes. I assumed it was. It's not about working late." He glanced around the open floor plan office. Too many ears. "Can you come into my office?" Claire's eyebrows rose slightly, but she stood, smoothing her simple black skirt. She followed him into his office, and he closed the door behind them. "Should I be concerned?" she asked, crossing her arms. "No. This is an opportunity, a lucrative one." Marcus sat on the edge of his desk, trying to look casual and confident. "I have investors coming to town, very important investors. They're traditional, family-oriented people, and they have certain expectations about stability and commitment." "Okay," Claire said slowly. "I told them I was married." "But you're not married." "Correct, which is where you come in." Marcus watched her face carefully. "I need someone to pose as my wife for 1 week, attend some dinners, meet the investors, smile, and be charming. You already know the business, you're professional, and you're very presentable. It's perfect. Claire stared at him for a long moment. Then she laughed. It wasn't a pleasant laugh. You want to rent me like furniture. I want to pay you extremely well to stand next to me and look presentable for a few dinners. It's simple. Your expectations of me are truly inspiring, Mr. Ashford. Marcus pressed on, sensing resistance. $50,000 cash. I'll wire it to you today as soon as you agree. That made her pause. He saw it, the way her breath caught, the slight widening of her eyes. 50,000 was more than she made in a year. He knew exactly what her salary was. He'd approved it after all. $50,000 to pretend to be your wife for 1 week, she said quietly. That's the offer, but I'll make it more interesting. Marcus leaned forward, unable to resist pushing his advantage. I bet you can't make it through the whole week without cracking. You'll mess something up, get nervous, say the wrong thing to these people. I give you until day 3 before you fall apart. But I'll pay you the full amount up front anyway because I'm generous. Claire's face went very still, very cold. You think I'll fail? I think you're a secretary, not an actress. These are sophisticated people. Old money. They'll see through any performance that's not perfect. You're going to lose this bet, Mr. Ashford. Marcus blinked. Is that a yes? Wire the money by noon, and for the record? She stepped closer to him, and he caught the scent of something light and floral. I've been managing your professional life for 3 years without cracking. I've handled your tantrums, your impossible demands, your last-minute crises, and your complete inability to keep a calendar. Managing your personal life for 1 week will be a vacation. She turned and walked back to her desk, leaving Marcus standing alone in his office, unsure whether he should feel pleased or concerned that she'd agreed so easily. By 6 that evening, Marcus was pulling up to his penthouse in the Gold Coast with Claire in his passenger seat. She'd been quiet during the drive, staring out the window at the city lights. The 50,000 had been wired at 11:45. She hadn't thanked him. The elevator opened directly into his penthouse. Claire stepped out and looked around. He saw her taking in the floor-to-ceiling windows, the modern furniture, the art on the walls that cost more than most people made in a decade. But her face showed nothing. No awe, no envy. Just polite interest. Guest room is down that hall, Marcus said, pointing. Bathroom en suite. We'll maintain separate spaces, obviously. How romantic, dear, Claire said, her tone dry. Marcus ignored the sarcasm. He pulled a file folder from his briefcase and set it on the kitchen island. This is everything you need to know about the Harper family. Thomas Harper made his fortune in manufacturing, transitioned to private equity in the 80s. His wife Eleanor comes from Boston old money. They believe very strongly in traditional values, family, commitment. Thomas has a philosophy. He won't invest in a man who can't commit to marriage because he thinks it indicates an inability to commit to long-term business strategy. So you lied to him. I created a narrative that made him comfortable investing. You lied. Marcus pulled out a small velvet box and opened it. Inside was a simple but elegant ring, white gold with a single diamond. This was my grandmother's. You'll wear it for the week. Don't lose it. Claire took the box and tried the ring on. It fit perfectly on her left hand. She held it up to the light, examining it. It's beautiful. The backstory is simple, Marcus continued, pulling out his iPad to show her notes he'd prepared. We met at a company function 18 months ago. You were consulting. You're not my secretary. That sounds too subordinate. We fell in love quickly. Got married 3 months ago. Small ceremony, just family. We're still in the honeymoon phase, very much in love. Consulting, Claire repeated. What kind of consulting? Something vague. Business strategy, maybe. If they ask for details, change the subject. The key is to let me handle all important conversations. You're there to look elegant, be charming, and let the Harpers see that I'm a stable, committed man. Think you can handle that? Claire stood, slipping the ring off and putting it back in the box. You're asking if I can smile, nod, and keep my mouth shut while you talk about important things. Essentially, yes. She walked to the floor-to-ceiling windows and looked out at the Chicago skyline. Let me make sure I understand the rules. I attend dinners with you. I play the devoted wife. I let you handle all business discussions. I don't embarrass you. I don't reveal that this is an arrangement. And in exchange, I get $50,000 and you get your investment. That's the deal, and you truly believe I'll fail by day 3. I think it's likely, but you'll still get paid. Claire turned to face him. In the city lights streaming through the windows, she looked different from the woman who sat at the desk outside his office. Stronger somehow, more formidable. You should know something about me, Marcus, she said, using his first name for the first time. I never lose bets. She picked up the ring box and headed toward the guest room. At the doorway, she paused and looked back at him. Oh, and you should probably start calling me darling, or sweetheart, or honey. We need to practice, don't we, husband? The last word was delivered with just enough sarcasm to sting. Then she closed the door, leaving Marcus standing alone in his enormous penthouse, holding the iPad with his carefully prepared notes, wondering what exactly he'd just set in motion. The next morning, Marcus picked Claire up at 9 for what he called appropriate wardrobe acquisition. She'd insisted on going home the night before to pack a proper bag, and now sat in his Mercedes wearing jeans and a simple sweater, her hair pulled back in a ponytail. She looked nothing like a CEO's wife, which was exactly why they were heading to Michigan Avenue. The boutique was the kind of place that didn't display prices in the window. Marcus had called ahead, and the owner, Simone, greeted them at the door with champagne flutes and an assessing eye. Mr. Ashford, wonderful to see you again, Simone said, then turned to Claire with a warm smile. And you must be the lucky lady. Congratulations on your marriage. Marcus froze for half a second. He hadn't told Simone they were married. She must have assumed. Thank you, Claire said smoothly, taking his arm with easy familiarity. We're still in the honeymoon phase. Everything's wonderful. I can tell, Simone said, leading them into the boutique. The way he looks at you, that's real love. You can't fake that kind of attention. Marcus realized he had been staring. He quickly looked away, focusing on a rack of dresses that all looked identical to him. For the next hour, Claire tried on outfit after outfit. Each time she emerged from the dressing room, Marcus found it harder to remember that this was his secretary. The third dress, a deep navy sheath that somehow made her eyes luminous, actually made him forget to breathe for a moment. Well, Claire asked, turning in front of the three-way mirror. Is this appropriate enough for your traditional investors? It's adequate, Marcus managed. Very professional. Claire's eyes met his in the mirror. Professional? I'm supposed to be your wife, not your accountant. You know what I mean. She turned to face him directly, stepping closer. Marcus, we're going to need to be more convincing than adequate. The Harpers are shrewd people. If they sense we're not genuinely in love, your investment disappears. Fine. You look beautiful. Better? Much better. She smiled and returned to the dressing room. I'll take this one. And the emerald dress I tried on earlier. That one's for tonight. When Claire emerged in the emerald dress, Marcus completely lost his train of thought. The color made her skin glow and her dark hair shine. She looked like she belonged on a red carpet, not answering his phones. See something you like, husband? Claire asked, catching him staring again. I was just thinking the color is good, he said, his voice rougher than intended. It's appropriate for tonight. Liar. But she was smiling. You were thinking something much less appropriate. Simone rang up 6 outfits, more than Marcus had planned, but he wasn't about to argue. As they left the boutique, shopping bags in hand, Claire checked her phone and her smile faded. Everything okay? Marcus asked. Fine. Just my mom checking in about my dad's physical therapy bills. Is he doing better? Claire looked surprised that he'd asked. Slowly. The stroke was 2 years ago, but recovery takes time. And money. Marcus wanted to ask more, but they'd arrived at his car. They drove back to his penthouse in silence, the shopping bags piled in the back seat, both of them processing what was about to happen. Tonight they'd have to convince 2 very perceptive people that their marriage was real. By 6 that evening, Marcus was pacing his living room in his tuxedo, running through conversation topics in his head. Don't mention business too quickly. Seem interested in their family. Ask about Eleanor's charity work. Let Claire handle the warm, personal questions. Marcus, you're going to wear a hole in the floor. He turned. Claire stood in the doorway in the emerald dress, her hair swept up in an elegant twist, subtle makeup highlighting her features. She looked breathtaking. I was just reviewing our cover story, he said. We met at a company function 18 months ago. I was consulting in business strategy. We fell in love quickly and got married 3 months ago. Small ceremony, just close family. Claire recited it like a shopping list. See? I remember. You should practice calling me something other than Marcus. Married people use pet names. All right, sweetheart. She crossed to him and reached up to straighten his bow tie, which he'd been fidgeting with. Hold still, darling. Her fingers brushed his collar, and Marcus held very still indeed. This close he could smell her perfume, something light and sophisticated he'd never noticed in the office. There, Claire said, patting his chest. Perfect. Now we need to establish some ground rules about physical contact. What kind of ground rules? The Harpers will expect us to be comfortable with each other, holding hands, touching. If we're stiff and awkward, they'll notice. So we should practice, Marcus said. We should establish boundaries. I'll touch you when it feels natural for the situation. You do the same. But remember, we're supposed to be madly in love, not co-workers pretending to be married. Right. Madly in love. Marcus took her hand, lacing their fingers together. Like this? That's a start. Though you're holding my hand like it might explode. I'm not. He looked down and realized she was right. He forced himself to relax his grip. Claire squeezed his hand gently. Better. Try to remember. I'm not actually going to embarrass you tonight. I know how to behave in social situations. I never said you'd embarrass me. You implied it, multiple times. But her tone was light, teasing. Relax, Marcus. This is just dinner. We'll be fine. The doorbell rang. Their car service had arrived. Showtime, Claire said softly. Marcus offered his arm. She took it with natural grace. As they walked to the elevator, Marcus noticed how perfectly they moved together. Like they'd done this 100 times before. Maybe this wouldn't be as difficult as he'd thought. Les Nomades was the kind of restaurant where senators proposed to their mistresses and CEOs discussed hostile takeovers over $800 bottles of wine. The private dining room Marcus had reserved was intimate. Just one table, soft lighting, fresh flowers. Thomas and Eleanor Harper were already seated when Marcus and Claire arrived. Thomas Harper stood immediately, a tall man in his late 60s with silver hair and shrewd blue eyes. Eleanor was elegant in a dove-gray dress, her white hair styled perfectly, her jewelry understated but clearly expensive. Marcus, Thomas crossed the room with his hand extended. Good to finally meet face to face, and this must be your beautiful bride. Claire, Marcus said, his hand at the small of her back. Claire, this is Thomas and Eleanor Harper. Claire's smile was genuine and warm. It's wonderful to meet you both. Marcus has told me so much about your family. All good things, I hope, Eleanor said, embracing Claire lightly. Oh, my dear, you're stunning. That dress is perfect on you. Thank you. Though I have to admit, left to his own devices, my husband would have had me wearing a business suit to dinner. Everyone laughed. Marcus felt the first knot of tension in his shoulders ease. They settled at the table and conversation flowed easily. Eleanor asked about the wedding and Claire told a charming story about a small ceremony in a garden with just close family present. Marcus was impressed by how naturally the lies came to her. Or maybe they weren't quite lies. Maybe she was imagining the wedding she'd want someday. And how are you finding married life? Thomas asked, directing the question at both of them. Revelatory, Marcus said. Claire challenges me in ways I didn't expect. Good, Thomas said with approval. A wife should challenge her husband, keeps a man honest. Eleanor certainly keeps me on my toes. 43 years and counting, Eleanor said, patting her husband's hand. The secret is finding someone who makes you better than you are alone. Claire looked at Marcus, and something in her expression made his chest tighten. I think we're discovering that, she said quietly. The appetizers arrived and conversation shifted to the Harpers family. They had 3 grown children and 5 grandchildren. Eleanor showed pictures on her phone, graduations, weddings, holidays. Our youngest granddaughter, Amy, is trying to decide between 2 universities, Eleanor said. Northwestern and University of Chicago, both excellent schools, same tuition, she's agonizing over it. What does Amy want to study? Claire asked, leaning forward with genuine interest. She's interested in policy work, loves debate team, wants to make a difference in government. Then she needs to think beyond just the academic program, Claire said. Where can she build the right relationships? Which school has stronger alumni connections in policy? Who are the professors she'll be learning from, not just what will she be learning? Eleanor nodded thoughtfully. That's excellent advice. When I was completing my graduate work, I chose my program based exactly on that criteria, Claire continued. Who I'd be learning from mattered more than the name on the degree. Changed everything for me. Marcus's wine glass stopped halfway to his mouth. Graduate work? You went to graduate school? Thomas asked, clearly interested. Claire seemed to realize what she'd said. Oh, that's boring dinner conversation. Eleanor, tell me how you and Thomas met. I love hearing how couples find each other. The subject smoothly changed, but Marcus couldn't focus. Graduate work. Claire had graduate education. In what? When? Why was she his secretary if she had an advanced degree? He caught her eye across the table and she gave him the tiniest shrug, as if to say, You never asked. The rest of dinner passed in a blur. Marcus participated in conversation automatically, but his mind was reeling. He'd worked with Claire for 3 years. 3 years. How had he never known this about her? As they said goodbye to the Harpers in the restaurant's foyer, Thomas pulled Marcus aside. That wife of yours is something special, he said quietly. Intelligent, charming, genuine. You're a lucky man, Marcus. I'm beginning to realize that. Good. Because I'll be honest. I was skeptical when you told me you'd gotten married so quickly. But seeing you two together, I see it. The partnership, the respect. That's what Eleanor and I have built our marriage on. Keep that, and you'll go far. In the car ride home, Marcus waited exactly 3 blocks before he couldn't hold it in anymore. An MBA? He asked. You have an MBA? From Northwestern, Claire said calmly, looking out the window. Top 10% of my class. When were you planning to mention this? You never asked, Marcus. She turned to face him. In 3 years, you never once asked me what I did before I started answering your phones. You never asked about my education, my background, my goals. I was the secretary, that's all you needed to know. But an MBA, you could be doing so much more than what? Than my job? Her voice had an edge now. You think I don't know that? I applied for analyst positions at Ashford Capital 3 times. Your HR department rejected me every time. Overqualified for entry-level, underqualified for senior positions because I lacked experience. It's a catch-22. So when the secretary position opened and it offered decent pay and insurance, I took it. Why did you need insurance so urgently? Claire was quiet for a moment. My father had a stroke during my final semester at Northwestern. The medical bills were catastrophic. I needed a job that would pay me immediately and provide health coverage. Your secretary position did both. I planned to move up after a year, but she trailed off. But what? But you never saw me as anything else. To you, I'm the person who orders your lunch and books your flights. You've never looked at me and seen someone with potential. Marcus wanted to argue, but he couldn't. Because she was right. He'd never asked. He'd never wondered. He'd never seen her as anything more than a function in his organization. They arrived at his penthouse in heavy silence. Claire kicked off her heels the moment they were inside, wincing slightly. Those were murder, she muttered, heading toward the guest room. Good night, Marcus. Claire, wait. He didn't know what he wanted to say. An apology? An explanation? You were incredible tonight. The Harpers loved you. That's what you're paying me for. She paused at the hallway entrance. For what it's worth, they're good people. I can see why you want their investment. You really helped me tonight. The things you said about Amy's college decision, that was smart. I have my moments. She almost smiled. See you tomorrow, husband. Tomorrow, right. We're supposed to go to their estate for a garden party. I remember. I'll be ready. Claire disappeared down the hallway and her door clicked shut. Marcus poured himself a scotch and stood at the windows looking out at the city. Through the glass, he could see his reflection. A man in an expensive tuxedo standing alone in an enormous apartment. It suddenly struck him as deeply sad. He pulled out his phone and looked up Northwestern's MBA program. Top 20 in the country. Highly competitive. He thought about Claire at her desk, answering phones, scheduling meetings, cleaning up his mistakes. What a colossal waste of talent. Why hadn't he ever asked? Around 2 in the morning, Marcus couldn't sleep. His mind kept replaying dinner. The way Claire had handled the Harpers with such ease. The revelation about her education, her sharp accusation in the car. He got up and walked toward the kitchen for water, but stopped outside the guest room. Light showed under the door. She was awake too. He knocked softly. Claire, you awake? No, I'm sleep-talking. He smiled despite himself. I wanted to say something about earlier. I should have asked. About your background, your education, your goals. I'm sorry I didn't. There was a long pause, then, it's 2 in the morning. Couldn't this wait until morning? No, because in the morning we put the masks back on. Right now we're just 2 people who can't sleep. Another pause. He heard movement, then her voice closer to the door. Why did you lie to the Harpers? About being married? Marcus leaned against the doorframe. Thomas Harper has a philosophy. Men who can't commit to marriage can't commit to long-term business strategy. My ex-fiancée left me 2 years ago. After that, I threw myself into work. No relationships, no distractions, but Harper wouldn't invest in what he saw as an unstable CEO, so I lied. Did you love her? Your ex? I thought I did, but looking back, I think I loved the idea of having someone more than I loved her specifically. Does that make sense? Perfect sense, Claire said quietly. I had someone like that in graduate school. We were going to get married, build a life. Then my dad got sick, and suddenly I wasn't the ambitious MBA candidate anymore. I was the woman with baggage and complications. He left. His loss. That's what my mom says. She's right. They were both quiet for a moment. Marcus could picture Claire on the other side of the door, probably sitting on the floor like he was. Just a few inches of wood between them. Can I ask you something? Claire said. Anything. What are you really afraid of? With the Harpers, with this investment? It's not just about money, is it? Marcus closed his eyes. I grew up poor. Really poor. Free lunch at school, wearing second-hand clothes, my mother working 3 jobs. I built Ashford Capital from nothing, and every single day I'm terrified it'll all vanish. That I'll wake up and be that poor kid again. You're not that kid anymore, Marcus. Aren't I? I'm still desperate to prove I belong. The Harper investment, it's not just $500 million. It's Thomas Harper, old money aristocracy, telling me I'm legitimate, that I'm one of them. You don't need their approval to be legitimate. Maybe not, but I think... He stopped, surprised by what he was about to say. I think I need yours. Silence. Then Claire's voice, soft and warm. You have it. You've always had it, Marcus. I wouldn't have agreed to this bet if I didn't believe in what you're building. Even though I never recognized what you could contribute. Even though people can change, right? They can learn to see things they missed before. I hope so. More silence, comfortable this time. Good night, Marcus, Claire finally said. Good night, Claire. He stayed there for another minute, sitting against the door, feeling closer to someone than he had in years. And that someone was technically his employee, pretending to be his wife, sleeping in his guest room. His life had gotten very complicated. But as Marcus finally stood and headed back to his room, he realized something else. Complicated didn't necessarily mean bad. Sometimes complicated meant interesting. Sometimes it meant real. And for the first time in 2 years, something in his life felt genuinely real. The Harper estate in Lake Forest was exactly what Marcus expected. 20 acres of manicured lawns, century-old oak trees, and a mansion that looked like it belonged in a British period drama. The garden party was in full swing when they arrived on day 2. With white tents scattered across the grounds and approximately 100 guests in attendance. Claire looked perfect in a pale blue sundress, her hair loose around her shoulders. Marcus noticed other men noticing her as they walked through the gardens, and he found himself moving closer, his hand settling naturally on her lower back. Relax, Claire murmured. You're doing that thing with your jaw again. What thing? The thing where you're tense and trying to look like you're not tense. Just breathe, we've got this. Eleanor Harper spotted them immediately and came over with her arms outstretched. Claire, Marcus, I'm so glad you could make it. Claire, dear, come meet my sister Margaret. She's been dying to talk to you after hearing about your advice for Amy. Eleanor swept Claire away into a cluster of elegant women near the rose garden. Marcus watched her go, then turned to find Thomas Harper approaching with several other businessmen. Marcus, excellent timing, Thomas said. I want you to meet Richard Sterling. He runs Sterling Ventures. I believe you two are in similar spaces. Marcus shook hands with Richard Sterling and immediately disliked him. Sterling was about 40, expensively dressed with the kind of easy confidence that came from old money and a string of successful acquisitions. He was everything Marcus had fought not to be, entitled, smug, born into advantage. Ashford Capital, Sterling said, his handshake just a fraction too firm. You've had an impressive run the last few years. We've been fortunate, Marcus replied carefully. I heard you recently acquired Midwest Manufacturing. Interesting choice. Most of us thought that company was finished. Did you? Marcus kept his voice neutral, but he felt defensive. Midwest had been a calculated risk, one his board had questioned extensively. The conversation turned to market trends, and Marcus found himself only half listening. His attention kept drifting to the rose garden where Claire stood with the women, laughing at something Eleanor's sister had said. She fit in perfectly. No hint of nervousness. No sign that she was anything other than exactly what she appeared to be. Across the lawn, near the elaborate rose bushes, Claire was actually enjoying herself. Eleanor's sister Margaret was charming, and the other women were genuinely interested in talking about something other than shopping and spa treatments. They were discussing education policy of all things, and Claire could actually contribute to the conversation. Then a voice behind her said, "I don't believe we've met." Claire turned to find an elegant blonde woman in a white designer dress, holding a champagne flute and wearing a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "I'm Victoria Ashford," the woman said, offering her hand. "I keep the name even though the marriage didn't work out. Old habit." Claire felt something cold settle in her stomach. Ashford. This was Marcus's ex-fiancée. "Claire," she said, shaking Victoria's hand, "lovely to meet you." Marcus's new friend? Victoria's eyes swept over Claire's dress, her jewelry assessing. "How quaint. Where did you two meet?" "Through work," Claire said carefully. "We discovered we had a lot in common." "How sweet." Victoria sipped her champagne. "Marcus has a type, you know. Ambitious women who think they can fix him. I tried for 2 years. Couldn't compete with his first love, Ashford Capital. But I'm sure you'll have better luck." Eleanor appeared at Claire's elbow. "Victoria, darling, I didn't know you were in town. How was London?" "Dreadfully boring," Victoria said. "I'm back in Chicago for a few months, reconnecting with old friends." Her eyes slid to where Marcus stood with the men. "Old flames." "Claire, come meet my sister's daughter," Eleanor said, smoothly extracting Claire from the conversation. "She's starting at Northwestern in the fall and would love to hear about your experience there." As they walked away, Eleanor leaned in and whispered, "Don't let Victoria bother you. She's never gotten over Marcus, even though she was the one who left. Jealous women can be terribly unpleasant." "I'm fine," Claire said, and she meant it. She'd handled worse than a bitter ex-girlfriend. But later, when Victoria cornered her near the refreshment table, Claire realized the woman wasn't done. "A word of advice," Victoria said quietly, positioning herself so they appeared to be having a friendly conversation. "Enjoy it while it lasts. Marcus is very good at intense beginnings. He pursued me relentlessly, made me feel like the center of his universe. Then the novelty wore off, and I realized I was competing with spreadsheets for his attention. You're new and shiny now. Give it 6 months." Claire met her eyes steadily. "I appreciate the concern, but I'm not you." "No, you're right." Victoria's smile sharpened. "You're younger, prettier, in a wholesome sort of way, but Marcus doesn't do wholesome. He does ambition, power, conquest. What are you really, a secretary, an assistant? Does it matter? It will when you realize you're a means to an end, not the end itself." "Fascinating," Claire said pleasantly. "Tell me, do you corner all of Marcus's friends with dire warnings? Or am I special?" Victoria's composure cracked slightly. "I'm trying to help you." "No, you're trying to make yourself feel better about the fact that he's moved on and you haven't." Claire set down her champagne glass. "Thank you for the advice. Excuse me. My husband needs me." She walked away feeling Victoria's glare on her back, but she didn't care. She'd dealt with worse than jealous ex-girlfriends. She found Marcus still with the business group, now including Richard Sterling, who was holding court about acquisition strategy. As she approached, she heard Sterling say something that made her pause. Midwest Manufacturing was a sentimental move, Sterling was saying. Marcus always did let emotions cloud his business judgment. The company's a dinosaur in a dying sector. Claire should have stayed quiet. She should have remembered she was supposed to be the supportive wife who didn't understand business. But she'd spent 3 years listening to Marcus make brilliant strategic decisions, and she wasn't about to let this smug man dismiss his work. "Is that what you think?" she asked, stepping into the circle of men. "That manufacturing is a dying sector?" Sterling turned to her with barely concealed condescension. "No offense, Mrs. Ashford, but the traditional manufacturing space is in decline. Everyone knows that." "Everyone's looking at the wrong metrics, then," Claire said calmly. "Midwest Manufacturing holds 17 patents for microalloy processes that are becoming critical for electric vehicle battery components. The sector isn't dying, it's pivoting. Marcus didn't overpay for a declining company. He bought the future at a discount while everyone else was focused on yesterday's financials." The circle of men had gone very quiet. Sterling was staring at her with reassessment in his eyes. "You've done your homework," he said slowly. "I always do." Claire turned to Marcus, who was frozen with his drink halfway to his mouth. "Sorry, darling, didn't mean to interrupt your conversation. Eleanor wanted me to tell you dinner will be served in 20 minutes. She kissed his cheek and walked away, feeling the weight of several very interested gazes following her. Behind her, Thomas Harper chuckled. "Marcus, your wife is remarkable. How did you get so lucky?" Marcus, still processing what had just happened, managed to say, "I ask myself that every day." Sterling was silent, but when Marcus finally looked at him, he saw something calculating in the other man's expression. Something that made Marcus's instincts prickle with warning. The car ride home was tense. Marcus was quiet, gripping the steering wheel too tightly. Claire stared out the window, wondering if she'd overstepped. Finally, Marcus broke the silence. "You held your own with Richard Sterling. Is that a problem? You destroyed him, in front of Thomas Harper and half a dozen other investors. I just corrected a misconception about your acquisition. You cited specific patent numbers and battery component applications." Marcus glanced at her. "How did you know all that?" "I read the acquisition brief. It was on your desk last month. I always read your documents before I file them. How else would I know where they go?" "You read confidential acquisition documents. They're not exactly confidential when you leave them scattered across your desk for me to organize." Claire turned to face him. "What's this really about, Marcus? Are you upset that I spoke? I'm surprised. Sterling is one of the sharpest investors in Chicago, and you just made him look foolish." "Good. He was being condescending about your work. So you defended me." "Yes. Was I not supposed to?" Marcus pulled into his building's parking garage and turned off the engine. They sat in the dim light, not moving. "I don't need defending," he said finally. "I can fight my own battles." "I know you can. But partners defend each other. That's what the Harpers expect to see. A partnership. You work for me, Claire, not with me. There's a difference." The moment the words left his mouth, Marcus regretted them. Claire's face went very still, very cold. "You're right," she said quietly. "There is a difference. One I apparently keep forgetting." She got out of the car and headed for the elevator without waiting for him. Marcus sat alone in his Mercedes, surrounded by expensive leather and chrome, and felt like the biggest fool in Chicago. Day 3 arrived with the weight of unspoken tension. Marcus and Claire moved around each other in the penthouse like polite strangers. She was professional, pleasant, and completely distant. It drove him crazy. The dinner that night was the most important one yet. Thomas Harper's investment advisor Gerald Morrison was joining them at Marcus's penthouse for a formal presentation. This was Marcus's chance to close the deal. He'd spent all day preparing his pitch, rehearsing his numbers, making sure every slide was perfect. But when he practiced it for Claire that afternoon, he could tell something was off. "You're losing them in the third paragraph," she said from where she sat on his couch reviewing the slides on her tablet. "I haven't asked for notes. You're front-loading too much data. Morrison is 68. He wants the human impact first, then the numbers. Lead with the why, then the what." Marcus tried it her way. It was better. Significantly better. "That's good," he admitted. "Help me with the rest?" For the next hour they worked together. The ice between them thawed slightly as they fell into an easy collaboration. Marcus had forgotten how good Claire was at this, seeing what he missed, anticipating problems, finding elegant solutions. "This is really good," he said when they finished. "Thank you." "You're welcome. Tonight, though, just let me handle the important conversations. Morrison can be difficult, and I've got this now." The warmth drained from Claire's face immediately. "Of course. I'll just stand there and look pretty. That's what you're paying me for." She left to get ready, and Marcus stood alone in his study, wondering why he kept saying exactly the wrong thing. By 7 that evening, the penthouse was transformed. Marcus had hired a private chef, arranged for flowers, set the table with his best china. Everything was perfect, except for the fact that he and Claire were barely speaking. The Harpers arrived first, then Gerald Morrison, a thin man in his late 60s with wire-rimmed glasses and the suspicious expression of someone who'd been pitched to by 1,000 CEOs, with big promises and small results. Dinner conversation started well. Claire was charming as always, drawing out stories from the Harpers about their grandchildren. Morrison remained largely silent, watching everything with those shrewd eyes. Then, as the main course was served, Morrison said, "Marcus, I want to talk about this sustainable investing initiative you're promoting." "Of course," Marcus said, setting down his fork. He'd prepared for this. "Ashford Capital is committed to identifying companies that—" "I've heard the pitch," Morrison interrupted. "I've heard it from a dozen firms in the past year. Every PE fund suddenly cares about the environment. It's marketing, not strategy." "It's more than marketing," Marcus said, feeling defensive. "There's real value in—" "Show me the returns. Show me hard data that says companies with good ESG scores outperform traditional investments over 20 years. Marcus pulled out his tablet, began scrolling through slides. "The 5-year averages show—" "5 years isn't a timeline, it's a blip." Morrison leaned back in his chair. "Trends come and go. I need to know this isn't just another passing fashion." Marcus felt the deal slipping away. He looked at his carefully prepared slides and realized Morrison was right. 5 years wasn't enough. The data he'd compiled wasn't convincing, not really. He was fumbling, trying to find another angle, when Claire set down her wine glass. "May I share a perspective?" she asked. Everyone turned to look at her. Marcus felt panic and relief in equal measure. "Please," Morrison said. Claire leaned forward slightly, her voice calm and confident. "Mr. Morrison, you're asking the right question but looking at the wrong time frame. The returns on sustainable investing don't show up in quarterly reports. They show up in risk mitigation. Companies with strong environmental and social practices have 40% fewer regulatory issues, 60% better employee retention, and significantly lower supply chain disruptions. That's not marketing. That's measurable risk reduction." Morrison was listening now, really listening. "My thesis at Northwestern examined this exact phenomenon," Claire continued. Undervalued companies aren't always undervalued because of poor performance. Sometimes they're undervalued because the market hasn't recognized their risk advantages yet. Sustainable companies are being mispriced by traditional metrics because those metrics were designed for a different era. The firms that recognize this now are getting in at ground level. In 10 years, this won't be called sustainable investing. It'll just be called smart investing. The silence that followed was absolute. Morrison was staring at Claire like she'd just spoken in a language he'd been trying to learn his entire life. "Your thesis," he said finally. "At Northwestern, what did you study?" "MBA with a focus on mergers and acquisitions and strategic investment," Claire said. "I specialized in identifying undervalued assets through cultural and operational indicators rather than just traditional financial metrics." "Marcus," Morrison turned to him, "your wife has an MBA from Northwestern?" Marcus, who had been sitting completely frozen, managed to nod. Thomas Harper was beaming. "Marcus, I've been patient with your presentation because I respect what you've built. But I'll be honest, I wasn't convinced until 30 seconds ago. Your wife just articulated exactly what I was struggling to understand about your strategy." "Gerald?" Morrison was still looking at Claire with something like wonder. "I'll recommend the investment. On one condition, Mrs. Ashford needs to be formally involved in Ashford Capital's strategy. This kind of thinking is what I want to invest in." After the guests left an hour later, Marcus and Claire stood alone in the penthouse. The catering staff had cleared everything. The night was over. The deal was saved. Marcus turned to Claire, and for the first time in years, he was completely, utterly speechless. She was putting wine glasses in the dishwasher as if she hadn't just delivered the most brilliant analysis Marcus had ever heard, as if she hadn't just saved his biggest deal with an impromptu presentation that was better than the pitch he'd spent weeks preparing. "You're welcome," she said without looking at him. "Who are you?" The words came out hoarse. Claire finally turned to face him. "I'm the woman who's been doing your job and mine for 3 years while you never noticed. The question is, who are you, Marcus? I didn't know. I didn't know you could what? Think, analyze, contribute something meaningful?" She crossed her arms. "You've spent this whole week surprised that I'm competent. What does that say about you?" "It says I'm an idiot." "Yes, it does." Marcus ran his hands through his hair. "Tell me everything. Your degree, your thesis, your career plans." "Why didn't you say something before?" "I did," Claire said, her voice tired. 3 years ago, I applied for an analyst position at your company. I included my MBA, my thesis abstract, letters of recommendation from professors. Your HR department rejected me. They said I was overqualified for entry-level but underqualified for senior positions because I lacked professional experience. So I took the secretary job because I needed insurance. My father had just had a stroke, Marcus. The medical bills were..." Her voice cracked. "I didn't know. Because you didn't ask. You saw secretary and that's all I became to you, a function, not a person with a history or potential. You should have pushed harder, advocated for yourself." Claire's laugh was bitter. "I did. I suggested improvements to your client onboarding process. You thanked me and ignored them. I caught a critical error in the Morrison acquisition last year. You fixed it without comment. I've been advocating, Marcus, you just weren't listening." Marcus sank onto the couch. Everything was shifting, recalibrating. The woman he'd thought he knew didn't exist. In her place was someone far more complicated, far more talented, far more extraordinary. "Tonight wasn't me trying to show you up," Claire said quietly. "It was me trying to help you because despite everything, I don't want you to fail." She headed toward the guest room and Marcus called after her. "Claire, wait. I'm tired, Marcus. Can we do this tomorrow?" "No. because tomorrow we'll put the masks back on. He stood and walked to her. I'm listening now. Really listening. Tell me everything. So she did. They sat on the couch and Claire told him about her MBA program, about the thesis she'd written on cultural indicators of company value, about her dreams of working in strategic investment. She told him about her father's stroke in December of her final semester, about dropping everything to come home, about the terror of watching her strong, vibrant father unable to speak or walk, about the medical bills that kept coming, the insurance that didn't cover everything, the desperate need for steady employment with benefits. I'd planned to take my time finding the right position, she said. Be strategic about my career, but life doesn't care about your plans. So I took your secretary job and I told myself it was temporary. Just until Dad was stable. Just until the bills were manageable. But then a year passed and you never looked at me as anything else, and it was easier to stay than to fight. I'm sorry, Marcus said, for 3 years of not seeing you. For tonight, telling you to stay quiet when you're smarter than half my executive team. For treating you like you're less than you are. Claire was quiet for a long moment. Why do you do it? She finally asked. The arrogance, the dismissiveness. Is it just ego? Marcus looked at her, this woman who'd just laid herself bare and decided she deserved honesty in return. I grew up poor, he said. Really poor. Free lunch at school, wearing clothes from donation bins, my mother working 3 jobs and still coming up short. I swore I'd never be that kid again. Never be. Powerless. Never be dismissed. So I built Ashford Capital from nothing. And every day I'm terrified it'll vanish. That I'll wake up and be that poor, worthless kid again. You're not worthless, Marcus. Aren't I? I'm still desperate to prove I belong. That's what the Harper investment is really about, old money validating new money. Thomas Harper approving me means I'm legitimate. I've made it. You don't need his validation. Maybe not. Marcus looked at her. But I think I need yours. They sat in silence, closer together than they'd been all week. The pretense had fallen away. This wasn't a fake marriage or a business arrangement. This was 2 people seeing each other clearly for the first time. You have it, Claire said softly. My validation, my approval, whatever you want to call it. You've always had it, Marcus. I wouldn't have agreed to this bet if I didn't believe in what you're building. Even though I never recognized what you could contribute. Even though people can change, they can learn to see things they missed. Marcus reached for her hand. She let him take it. Thank you, he said, for tonight, for saving my deal, for being extraordinary. You're welcome, she squeezed his hand. But we need to talk about what happens after this week, because day 7 is coming and I don't know what we are beyond this arrangement. Neither do I, Marcus admitted, but I know I don't want it to end. Before Claire could respond, Marcus's phone rang. He ignored it. It rang again. You should answer that, Claire said. It was his operations director, panicked about a crisis at Midwest Manufacturing. The board wanted an emergency meeting to discuss selling it off. Poor short-term returns. They'd lost confidence in the acquisition. Marcus hung up and let loose a string of profanity that would have impressed a sailor. How bad? Claire asked. Bad. The board thinks I made a mistake. They want to cut losses and sell. That's short-sighted. The IP alone is worth... I know, but I can't convince them. They see the quarterly numbers and panic. Claire stood. Let me look at the data. Give me 2 hours. Claire, this is complex. Years of financial analysis. 2 hours, Marcus. What do you have to lose? Day 4 arrived and Marcus dragged himself to the charity gala that evening in a fog of stress. The Midwest situation was imploding. The board meeting was scheduled for tomorrow. He was going to lose the company, prove all his critics right, validate every doubt. Claire appeared at his side in a black dress that should have been illegal, looking calm and composed. "Did you sleep?" she asked. "No." "You?" "A little." She straightened his bow tie with familiar ease. "We'll figure it out." "We? This isn't your problem. Partners, remember? Or was that just for show?" At the gala, Richard Sterling found them within 15 minutes. Marcus tensed immediately, but Sterling's attention was entirely on Claire. "Mrs. Ashford," Sterling said with a smile that was too warm, too interested. "I've been thinking about our conversation at the garden party. Your analysis of the Midwest acquisition was impressive." "Thank you," Claire said politely. "I did some research. Northwestern MBA, top-of-your-class thesis on undervalued assets. You're wasting considerable talent." Sterling pulled a business card from his pocket. "I'd like to offer you a position at Sterling Ventures, VP of Strategy. $180,000 to start, full benefits, equity options. You'd be leading a team, making real strategic decisions." Marcus felt something hot and possessive flare in his chest. "Mr. Sterling, my wife and I need to rejoin our guests." "Of course." Sterling handed Claire his card anyway. "The offer stands. Call me anytime." In the car afterward, Marcus was barely holding it together. "Are you considering it?" "Why wouldn't I?" Claire asked. "It's more money than I've ever made doing work I'm actually qualified for." "Because you work for me. For 3 more days, Marcus. Then the bet's over and I'm free to do whatever I want." "You're not taking Sterling's offer." "That's not your decision." "You work for me," Marcus repeated. Claire turned to face him. "I work for you, Marcus, not with you. There's a huge difference. Sterling's offering me a partnership. What are you offering?" Marcus had no answer. Day 5. Morning, they made breakfast together in tense silence. Claire made eggs while Marcus burned toast. It should have been awful, but instead it felt domestic. Real. Like an actual marriage. "You're burning the toast again," Claire said. "I'm not." He looked. "Okay, I am. How do you survive when I'm not around?" "Takeout. Lots of takeout." She laughed and the tension eased slightly. They ate together, talking about nothing important. For a moment, they were just 2 people sharing breakfast. Then Marcus's phone rang, the Midwest CEO. Marcus listened, his face darkening, then hung up and started pacing. "They're quitting," he said. "The whole senior leadership team, they've lost confidence. This is a disaster." By 10 that night, Marcus was in full crisis mode. He'd been on conference calls for hours, reviewing financials, trying to find a solution that didn't exist. Claire appeared in his study doorway at midnight. He'd thought she was asleep. "I know you don't want my help," she said, "but you're looking at this wrong." "Claire, I appreciate it, but the problem isn't financial. It's operational leadership." Marcus stopped pacing. "What?" "Thomas Brennan, your CEO, he's 67, built his career in traditional manufacturing. He doesn't understand the pivot to EV components because he's never worked in that industry. You're trying to execute a tech industry strategy with old-school manufacturing leadership. So what's the solution?" Claire entered the study, handed him her tablet. "Replace him. I've identified 3 candidates, all former battery industry executives with experience scaling operations. Sarah Chen is perfect. She transformed lithium tech from 50 million to 300 million in 4 years." Marcus read her analysis. It was brilliant, comprehensive, exactly right. When did you? "I've been working on it all day while you were on calls. You needed a solution, so I found one." Marcus looked up at her. "You're incredible. I've been telling you for days." He crossed to her. They were standing very close now, close enough that he could see flecks of gold in her brown eyes. "Claire, He kissed her. Impulsive, desperate, grateful. She made a small sound of surprise, then kissed him back. The tablet fell to the floor, forgotten. This wasn't the practiced kiss of their first dinner. This was real, raw, 3 days of tension and attraction and connection finally breaking through. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Claire whispered, "This complicates things." "Good," Marcus said. "I'm tired of uncomplicated." "Marcus, the bet ends in 2 days. We need to... I don't care about the bet anymore. We should talk about what this means." "Later," he said, pulling her closer. "Right now, I just want this." She kissed him again, and he lost himself in it, in her. When they finally came up for air, Claire's phone buzzed, a text from her mother. Reality crashed back in. "I should go," she said, but she didn't move. "We both need sleep." "Stay," Marcus said, "and just for a while." So they stayed, curled together on his study couch, talking until they fell asleep in each other's arms. For the first time in years, Marcus didn't feel alone. Marcus woke on day 6 to sunlight streaming through unfamiliar windows. It took him a moment to realize he was in his study, still on the couch. And Claire was curled against him, her head on his chest, her hand resting over his heart. He didn't move, didn't want to break the moment. She stirred, opening her eyes slowly. When she saw where they were, a small smile crossed her face. "We fell asleep," she murmured. "We did. In your study. Technically, you were on the couch and I was sort of half on, half off," Marcus said. "Very proper." Claire laughed softly. "That's not how the Harpers would see it. The Harpers would think we're a normal married couple." She looked up at him, and something in her expression made his chest tight. "We're not married, Marcus." "Not yet." The words hung in the air. Claire sat up slowly. "What did you say?" Marcus realized what he'd implied. "I didn't mean to." "What did you mean, Marcus?" He sat up too, running a hand through his hair. "I meant I don't want this to end, the week, the arrangement, us. I know it's complicated. I know we need to figure out what this is, but Claire, I don't want Sunday to come and have you just go back to your desk and pretend this never happened." "So what do you want?" "I don't know yet, but I know I want you." Claire was quiet for a long moment. Then she leaned in and kissed him, soft and sweet. "One more day," she whispered. "Let's just get through tonight's dinner with the Harpers. Then we'll figure out what comes next." "One more day," Marcus agreed. His phone buzzed insistently, multiple texts from an unknown number. He frowned and opened them. They were all from Victoria. "We need to talk. It's important." "I know what you're doing, Marcus. I'm coming over. We need to discuss this face to face. I still have my key code. If you don't answer, I'm letting myself in." Marcus swore. "Victoria's in Chicago. She's threatening to come here." "Then talk to her," Claire said, standing and smoothing her rumpled dress. "She's part of your past. You can't just ignore her. Watch me." "Marcus, be serious. If she's going to cause problems, better to deal with it now before tonight's dinner." She was right, but Marcus didn't want to deal with his unstable ex-fiancée. He wanted to stay in this moment, in this new fragile thing he and Claire were building. But his phone rang. Victoria calling. "I'll handle it," he said. "Give me an hour." Claire nodded and headed to the guest room to shower and change. Marcus answered the phone and told Victoria to meet him at a coffee shop downtown. Neutral territory, public place. He should have known she wouldn't listen. An hour later, Claire was alone in the penthouse, having just gotten out of the shower. Marcus had left to meet Victoria, though Claire suspected that was a mistake. The woman had seemed unhinged at the garden party. The doorbell rang. Claire frowned. Marcus had a key. She wrapped her robe tighter and checked the security screen. Victoria Ashford stood in the hallway, perfectly styled in a cream designer suit, holding a Louis Vuitton bag. Claire's instincts screamed not to open the door, but if she didn't, Victoria would just keep coming back. Better to deal with this now. She opened the door but didn't invite Victoria in. Marcus isn't here. I know, I saw him leave. I wanted to talk to you, woman to woman. We have nothing to discuss. Don't we? Victoria pushed past Claire into the penthouse. Nice place. I used to live here, you know, before Marcus decided his company was more important than our relationship. Claire closed the door but stayed near it. You should leave. In a minute. First, I want to give you some friendly advice. Victoria set her bag down and turned to face Claire with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. You're not his wife. I had you investigated. There's no marriage certificate on file anywhere in Illinois. The $50,000 wire transfer last Monday, though, that was easy to find. Claire's blood went cold. You're an employee, Victoria continued. Claire Matthews, executive secretary, $45,000 a year. Northwestern MBA that you've never used. Interesting credentials for someone. Answering phones. Get to the point. The point is, this charade you're playing, it ends tonight. I'm going to the Harper dinner. I'm going to tell them the truth, that Marcus hired you to pose as his wife, that it's all fake. Why would you do that? Because Marcus is mine, Victoria said simply. He always has been. We had 2 years together. Real years, not some paid arrangement. He loves me. He's just confused right now, distracted by you. Once you're gone, he'll remember what we had. Claire studied the woman in front of her. Beautiful, polished, and utterly delusional. He doesn't love you, Claire said quietly. He hasn't for a long time. Maybe he never did. Victoria's composure cracked. You don't know anything about us? I know he never talks about you. I know when your name comes up, he looks uncomfortable. I know you left him for someone wealthier, and now that relationship failed, you're trying to crawl back. But he's moved on. To you? Victoria laughed bitterly. You're a temporary diversion, a means to an end. Do you really think Marcus Ashford would choose a secretary over me? I think Marcus will choose whoever makes him happy, and that's not you. We'll see tonight. Victoria picked up her bag. When I expose your little arrangement in front of the Harpers, when his precious investment disappears, we'll see who he blames. We'll see who he comes back to. She left, and Claire stood alone in the penthouse, her hands shaking. She should call Marcus, warn him. But part of her wanted to see how this played out, wanted to see what he would do when the choice became real. That evening, Marcus and Claire prepared for the final Harper dinner in tense silence. Claire had told him about Victoria's visit, about the threats. Marcus had tried to call Victoria, tried to reason with her, but she wasn't answering. We'll handle it, he'd said. If she shows up, we'll tell the Harpers the truth ourselves. Control the narrative. And if they pull the investment, then they pull it. I'm not losing you over $500 million. The words should have comforted Claire. Instead, they made her nervous. Marcus was making promises he might not be able to keep. By 7, the Harpers had arrived and dinner was underway. The atmosphere was celebratory. Thomas was ready to commit. Papers would be signed next week. The deal was done. Then, halfway through the main course, the doorbell rang. Marcus excused himself to answer it. Through the dining room doorway, Claire heard his voice, sharp with anger. Victoria, you can't be here. Can't I? Victoria's voice was too loud, slightly slurred. She'd been drinking. These are my friends too, Marcus. I have every right to be here. She swept into the dining room before Marcus could stop her, and Claire's stomach dropped. Thomas, Eleanor, Victoria said brightly, kissing both Harpers on the cheek. I hope you don't mind the intrusion. When I heard you were having a final dinner to celebrate Marcus's upcoming investment, I simply had to stop by. Victoria, Eleanor said carefully, and what a surprise. Isn't it? Victoria turned her bright, false smile on Claire. And Claire, still playing dress-up, I see. Marcus moved to intercept her. Victoria, you need to leave now. Why? Because I might tell the truth? Because I might mention that she's not actually your wife? The room went very still. Thomas set down his fork slowly. What are you talking about? Oh, you don't know? Victoria pulled papers from her purse, printouts of bank records. Marcus wired $50,000 to Claire Matthews last Monday, payment for services rendered. She's not his wife. She's his secretary. This whole thing is a lie. Gerald Morrison, who had been quietly eating, looked up sharply. Thomas, Marcus began, let me explain. Is this true? Thomas's voice was cold. Claire, are you Marcus's secretary? All eyes turned to Claire. She could lie. She could deny it, but she was so tired of lies. Yes, she said quietly. I'm his executive secretary. Marcus asked me to pose as his wife for the week to help close your investment. I agreed. Eleanor's face fell. Thomas looked between Marcus and Claire, his expression unreadable. So everything was fake, Eleanor said. The stories about your wedding, your relationship, all of it? The beginning was transactional, Claire admitted. But this is exactly what I've been trying to tell you, Victoria interrupted triumphantly. Marcus is a liar. He manipulates people. He used me. Now he's using her. This is who he is. That's enough, Marcus said sharply. Victoria, leave, now. Why? The truth hurts? The truth, Claire said, standing up, is more complicated than you think. Everyone turned to look at her. She felt exposed, vulnerable, but also clear. This was the moment. Either she fought for Marcus or she let Victoria win. You're right, Claire said, meeting Thomas Harper's eyes. We're not legally married. Marcus asked me to pretend to be his wife, and I agreed because I needed the money. My father's medical bills, my student loans, $50,000 was more than I could turn down. So, it was just about money, Victoria said. At first, Claire continued, ignoring her. But something happened this week. I saw who Marcus really is. Not the CEO, not the deal maker, but the man underneath. Someone who's terrified of not being good enough. Someone who grew up poor and is desperate to prove he belongs. Someone who lied about being married because Thomas Harper said he didn't invest in uncommitted men. Claire, Marcus said quietly, you don't have to. Yes, I do. She turned back to the Harpers. Marcus asked me to help him with something important. Not just for money, but because I saw his vision for what Ashford Capital could become. I've watched him work for 3 years. I know his capabilities, his integrity, his potential. Yes, we started with a lie. But what we built this week, the partnership, the respect, the understanding, that's real. That's beautiful, Thomas said. But it doesn't change the fact that you both lied to us, to our faces, repeatedly. You're right, Claire said. And I'm not asking you to excuse that. I'm asking you to look at what matters. Is it the ceremony or is it the commitment? Marcus and I aren't legally married, but we've become genuine partners. Isn't that what you wanted to see? Gerald Morrison spoke for the first time. Young lady, you make an interesting argument, but trust is fundamental in business relationships. If Marcus will lie about something this significant, what else will he lie about? The question hung in the air. Victoria looked triumphant. We need time to reconsider, Thomas said finally, standing. Eleanor, we should go. Thomas, please, Marcus started. Our lawyers will be in touch, Thomas said. His tone made it clear. The investment was dead. The Harpers left. Gerald Morrison followed. Victoria stayed long enough to whisper to Marcus, "I told you she'd ruin you," before sweeping out with a satisfied smile. Then Marcus and Claire were alone in the wreckage of the dinner. The silence was suffocating. Claire started clearing plates, needing something to do with her hands. "Leave it," Marcus said. "We should clean up." "Leave it!" His voice was sharp, angry. Claire set down the plates and turned to face him. His face was pale, his hands clenched into fists. "This is exactly why I should have hired a professional actress," he said. "Someone who could have handled this situation properly instead of—" "Instead of what?" Claire asked, her voice dangerously quiet. "Instead of making it worse. You told them everything. You admitted we lied. You destroyed any chance of salvaging this." "I told the truth because we were caught. Victoria had evidence, Marcus. What did you want me to do?" "I wanted you to let me handle it," he was yelling now. "This is my company, my investment, my decision. But you had to jump in and play the hero with your little speech about partnership and commitment. That speech almost saved it. Almost isn't good enough. I needed this investment, Claire. I needed Thomas Harper's approval. And now it's gone because my secretary couldn't handle a simple week of pretending to be my wife." The words hit Claire like a physical blow. "My secretary. Is that what I am to you?" she asked, her voice shaking. "Still? After everything?" Marcus's face was twisted with fear and anger. "The bet's over. I'll pay you the full amount. But let's not pretend this was anything more than a business arrangement. You played your part, I'll pay you, and Monday you go back to your desk." Claire felt something inside her go very cold, very calm. "You're right," she said quietly. "It was a business arrangement. And professionally speaking, you just proved that you haven't learned a single thing this week." She walked to where he'd given her the ring on day one, opened the box and placed the ring inside. Then she set it on the table. "The Harpers weren't going to invest in your firm, Marcus. They were going to invest in our partnership, but there is no partnership. There's just you, terrified that someone might be your equal, too scared to actually change. Claire, the bet's over, you won. I didn't make it to day 7 without cracking, because apparently standing up for you in front of investors counts as cracking. Keep your money, I don't want it anymore. You need it. Your father's bills, I'll figure it out," Claire said, grabbing her purse. "I always do. Unlike you, I don't need validation from billionaires to know my worth." "Where are you going?" "Away from you." She headed for the door, then turned back one last time. "You want to know the saddest part? For a few days I thought I saw the real you. The man who was vulnerable, honest, capable of change. But that man was the pretend one. This," she gestured at his rigid, angry stance, "this is who you really are. Someone so terrified of being hurt that you hurt everyone else first. I'm not." "Yes, you are. You just threw away the best thing that ever happened to you because you're too scared to believe you deserve it." Claire walked out, closing the door quietly behind her. Marcus stood alone in his penthouse, surrounded by the remains of the dinner, the closed ring box on the table, and the crushing weight of what he'd just done. He replayed the week in his head. Claire's laugh at the boutique, the way she'd saved his pitch, her vulnerable confession about her father, the kiss in his study, her hand in his. He thought about what she'd said to the Harpers, not defending herself, but defending him, explaining his fears, his history, his worth. She'd fought for him even when he'd broken her trust, and he'd repaid her by calling her just his secretary. Marcus sank onto the couch, the same couch where they'd fallen asleep together just hours ago. He could still smell her perfume. He'd lost her, completely. More than that, he'd proven her right. He was too scared to change, too terrified to let someone in, too convinced he didn't deserve good things. He picked up the ring box and opened it. The ring gleamed in the light, still warm from her hand. For the first time since he was 10 years old and his mother worked 3 jobs to keep them from starving, Marcus Ashford cried. He'd finally found someone extraordinary, someone who saw him, challenged him, made him better. And he'd destroyed it with his own fear. Day 7 arrived with gray clouds and the threat of rain. Marcus stood in his penthouse at 6 in the morning, having not slept at all. He'd spent the entire night replaying everything, understanding too late exactly what he'd lost. Claire was right. He'd been too terrified to believe he deserved good things, so he'd destroyed them before they could be taken away. But maybe it wasn't too late. Maybe he could fix this. He picked up his phone and called Thomas Harper. "Marcus," Thomas answered, his voice cool. "This is early. I need to meet with you this morning, please, before you make your final decision." There was a long pause. 9 o'clock, my office. You have 15 minutes. I'll be there. At 8:30, Marcus stood in his closet staring at his suits. He'd built his entire identity around looking the part, seeming like he belonged. But none of that mattered now. He put on jeans and a simple sweater. No armor today. Just himself. Across town, Claire sat in her small apartment surrounded by boxes. She'd started packing. She couldn't go back to being Marcus's secretary after everything. She'd find another job, figure out her father's bills somehow. She always did. Her phone rang. It was Richard Sterling. "Ms. Matthews," he said. "I heard about what happened at the Harper dinner. Victoria's been telling everyone. I wanted to reiterate my offer. VP of Strategy, full benefits. You'd be an asset to Sterling Ventures." "I need some time to think about it," Claire said. "Of course, but Claire, what you did last night, standing up and telling the truth even when it cost you everything? That's the kind of integrity I want on my team. Call me when you're ready." After he hung up, Claire sat holding her phone. Sterling was offering her exactly what she'd always wanted. A real position, using her skills, making good money. It was the practical choice. So why did it feel wrong? At 9 o'clock, Marcus sat across from Thomas Harper in his downtown office. Eleanor was there too, sitting beside her husband with a carefully neutral expression. "You have 15 minutes, Thomas said. "Make it count." Marcus took a deep breath. "I'm not here to pitch you. I'm here to tell you the truth. All of it." He told them everything. About lying 6 months ago because he was desperate for validation. About the bet with Claire because he couldn't see her value until she was forced into his view. About how she'd challenged him, changed him, made him see his own blindness. "She has an MBA from Northwestern," Marcus said. "Top of her class. I kept her as my secretary for 3 years because I never looked at her as anything more than a function. She applied for analyst positions 3 times. My HR department rejected her every time. That's on me. I built a company culture where talent gets overlooked because of titles and assumptions." "Why are you telling us this?" Eleanor asked gently. "Because you said you invest in partnerships, in commitment, in people who make each other better." Marcus pulled papers from his folder. "I'm restructuring Ashford Capital. Claire Matthews will be co-CEO with full equity partnership, 50-50. Equal authority, equal voice. The papers are already drawn up. I'm signing them today whether you invest or not." Thomas leaned forward. "You're giving away half your company." "I'm not giving it away. I'm recognizing that it should have been hers all along. She's been making me better for 3 years. I was just too arrogant to notice." "And what about the personal relationship?" Eleanor asked. "Was any of that real?" "All of it," Marcus said quietly. "I fell in love with her, really in love, not the transactional relationship I had with Victoria, not the idea of having someone, but actually her. Claire. The woman who challenges me, sees through my defenses, makes me want to be better than I am. And does she love you? She did, but I destroyed it. I said cruel things because I was scared. I called her just my secretary when she's the most extraordinary person I've ever met. So no, she doesn't love me anymore, and I don't blame her. Thomas and Eleanor exchanged a long look. If she's so extraordinary, Thomas said, why isn't she here defending herself? Because she has too much dignity to beg for validation from people who doubted her. She shouldn't have to defend herself. Her work speaks for itself. At that moment, Thomas's assistant knocked and opened the door. Sir, I'm sorry to interrupt, but Ms. Matthews is here. She says she needs to speak with you urgently. Marcus's heart stopped. Claire? Send her in, Thomas said. Claire walked in and Marcus felt his breath catch. She looked exhausted, like she hadn't slept either. When her eyes met his, something flickered in her expression before she looked away. I apologize for coming without an appointment, Claire said to the Harpers. But I couldn't let this go without saying something. We're listening, Eleanor said. Claire didn't sit. She stood, hands clasped in front of her, and spoke with quiet intensity. What Marcus told you 6 months ago about being married was a lie. What Victoria exposed last night was true. We had a transactional arrangement. But the most important truth is this. Marcus Ashford is worth your investment. Not because of his returns, though they're excellent. Not because of his market instincts, though they're sharp. But because he's one of the few CEOs willing to admit when he's wrong and change course. Ms. Matthews, Thomas began, but Claire wasn't finished. I've worked for Marcus for 3 years. I've seen him make brilliant decisions and terrible ones. I've seen him be arrogant and dismissive. But I've also seen him learn. This week he learned to see people he'd been blind to. He learned that partnership matters more than control. He learned that being vulnerable isn't weakness. Most people never learn those things. He did. In 7 days. You're defending him, Eleanor said softly. Even after what he said to you last night. I'm defending what he can become, what he's trying to become. Claire finally looked at Marcus. He's not perfect, but he's trying. That's more than most people do. Thomas stood and walked to his window. The room was silent except for the quiet tick of an antique clock on the wall. Gerald, Thomas finally said, we'll have the investment papers drawn up. 500 million as originally discussed, contingent on one condition. What condition? Marcus asked. That Ms. Matthews accepts the co-CEO position you're offering. If she doesn't want to work with you, then neither do we. Marcus turned to Claire. She was staring at Thomas in shock. Claire? Marcus said quietly. She looked at him. Really looked at him. He let her see everything, the regret, the love, the desperate hope that maybe he hadn't destroyed everything beyond repair. On one condition, Claire said finally. We do this as equals. Real equals. No more dismissiveness. No more calling me just your secretary. No more fear. Real equals, Marcus promised, I swear. Then yes, I accept. After they left the Harpers' office, they stood on the sidewalk in awkward silence. The rain had started, light drops that felt like nature's reset button. I should thank you, Marcus said, for showing up, for defending me. You would have done the same for me. I should have done it last night. Instead, His voice cracked. Claire, I'm so sorry. Everything I said was wrong. You're not just anything. You're extraordinary. You're brilliant. You're the best thing that ever happened to me, and I was too terrified to admit it. You hurt me, Claire said quietly. I know. I have no excuse. I panicked and I lashed out and I said things designed to hurt you because I was so scared of being hurt first. It's what I always do. What I've always done. I know. She finally met his eyes. That's why I came this morning. Not for you, for me. Because I needed to prove to myself that I could stand up for what matters even when it's hard, even when I'm hurt. You're incredible. I know that now. A small smile. You helped me see it, actually. This week I remembered who I was before life beat me down. Someone capable, someone with value, so thank you for that. Come with me, Marcus said suddenly. Please. I need to show you something. Marcus, 20 minutes, then if you want to leave, I'll drive you home, I promise. She hesitated, then nodded. They drove through Chicago in silence, rain streaking the windows. When they pulled into the Ashford Capitol parking garage, Claire gave him a questioning look. Trust me, he said. He led her to the elevator, pressed the button for the roof. When the doors opened, Claire gasped. The rooftop had been transformed. Lights strung between posts, flowers in arrangements, a small table with 2 chairs. The view of Chicago stretched behind it all, gray and beautiful in the rain. You did this? Claire asked. This morning, before I went to see the Harpers. Marcus stepped closer. A week ago, I stood here and made you a bet I was certain you'd win. I was testing you. But you were testing me, and I failed, spectacularly. Marcus, let me finish, please. He took her hands. You showed me that real leadership isn't being the smartest person in the room. It's recognizing the smart people around you and trusting them. You showed me that success without genuine connection is just expensive loneliness. You showed me that I was so busy protecting myself that I was missing everything that mattered. I know all this. I don't just want you as my business partner, Claire. I want you as my life partner, as my equal in everything, as the person who challenges me and frustrates me and makes me better every single day. Marcus dropped to one knee in the rain. Claire's breath caught. This isn't a bet. It's not a transaction. It's not about business or investments or appearances. He pulled out a ring, not his grandmother's, but a new one. This is me asking you, Claire Matthews, to marry me, for real. Because I love you. Because you make me want to be someone worthy of you. Because I can't imagine building anything, business or life, without you beside me. Tears were streaming down Claire's face, mixing with rain. You really hurt me. I know. You called me just your secretary when I'm so much more than that. You're everything. I know that now. If I say yes, this doesn't fix everything. You still have work to do. We have work to do. I know. I'm willing to do that work every day for as long as it takes. Claire looked at him kneeling in the rain, vulnerable and honest, and finally seeing her. Ask me properly, she said. No hedging, no conditions, just the question. Claire Matthews, will you marry me? Yes. Marcus stood and pulled her into his arms, kissing her in the rain while the city spread out around them. When they broke apart, both were soaked and laughing. I'm keeping my own last name on the company letterhead, Claire said. Ashford and Matthews Capital, partners are equals, remember? I wouldn't have it any other way. 6 months later, the rooftop looked even more beautiful. They'd turned it into a permanent event space. The Partnership Terrace. White flowers adorned every surface. 50 guests sat in elegant chairs, watching as Claire walked down the aisle. Her father was beside her, still using his walker, but stronger now. The new treatment plan was working. He squeezed her hand as they walked. He's a good man, her father whispered. Took him a while to see what was right in front of him, but he got there. That's all that matters, Dad, that he got there. Marcus stood at the altar in a perfectly tailored suit, but his eyes were only for Claire. She wore a simple ivory dress, her hair loose around her shoulders, and she'd never looked more beautiful. The officiant smiled at them. Marcus and Claire have chosen to write their own vows. Marcus, I, Marcus Ashford, promise to see you, Marcus said, his voice steady. every day, to value your voice as much as my own, to challenge you when you need it and support you always, and per Section 3.2 of our partnership agreement, to respect your autonomy and decision-making authority in all matters. Laughter rippled through the crowd. And I, Claire Matthews, promise to keep you humble, Claire said, smiling through tears. To remind you when you're being an arrogant CEO. To be your equal partner in building something meaningful. And per Section 4.1 of our partnership agreement, to call you on your nonsense whenever necessary. And do you both promise to love each other? The officiant asked. We do, they said together. Then by the power vested in me, I now pronounce you partners in business and in life. You may kiss. Marcus kissed his wife while their friends cheered. Thomas Harper, sitting in the front row, leaned to Eleanor and whispered, "Best investment we ever made." 3 years later, Ashford and Matthews Capital occupied an entire floor of their downtown building. The company had tripled in size and was featured in Fortune magazine as the power couple reshaping private equity. But on this particular evening, Claire stood in a ballroom giving a speech to 50 nervous scholarship recipients. 3 years ago, she told them, I was cleaning offices and answering phones, drowning in student debt, wondering if my MBA would ever mean anything. Someone took a chance on me. Well, technically he made a bet that I'd fail. The audience laughed, but I proved him wrong, and now I'm betting on all of you. The Second Chance Scholarship Fund was their legacy project. 50 full MBA scholarships every year for working professionals who couldn't otherwise afford graduate school. Claire personally mentored 10 of them. After the speeches, she returned to the office where Marcus was still working. They'd designed their executive suite with 2 desks facing each other, literal equals. How was the gala? He asked. Inspiring. One of the recipients reminds me of me at that age. Brilliant, but convinced no one will ever see it. Good thing she has you now. A knock on the door. A young entrepreneur they were considering investing in. Sorry to interrupt. Should I come back? No, come in, Claire said. We're just reviewing your proposal. As the young woman presented her sustainable textiles company, Marcus started to interrupt. The margins seem too thin. I'm not sure. Claire caught his eye and gave a slight shake of her head. Marcus stopped, reconsidered. Actually, tell me more about your supply chain innovation. I might be missing something. After the entrepreneur left, Claire grinned. You almost Marcused that situation. I know. Old habits. He stood and crossed to her desk, pulling her up for a kiss. Good thing I have you to keep me honest. Good thing, she agreed. They stood at the windows looking out at Chicago. Marcus wrapped his arms around her from behind. Do you ever think about that week? He asked. The bet? Sometimes. It was the worst and best week of my life. I was such an idiot. Yes, you were, Claire turned in his arms. But you learned. That's what matters. Best bet I ever lost. Best bet I ever won. She kissed him. Though technically I did make it past day 3 without cracking. So I actually won the bet. You demolished the bet. You demolished me in the best possible way. Their phones buzzed simultaneously, a message from Thomas Harper. The investment fund they'd created together had just closed its biggest deal yet. Partners? Marcus asked. Always, Claire replied. And there, in their shared office with their facing desks and equal titles, Marcus Ashford and Claire Matthews proved what the Harpers had known all along. The best investments aren't just in companies, they're in people, in partnerships, in the extraordinary things that happen when 2 people finally see each other clearly and choose to build something together. What did you think of Marcus and Claire's story? Leave your thoughts in the comments. Rate this story from 0 to 10. What score would you give it? Subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications to follow all our stories. And check out more emotional stories by clicking right here on the final screen.